This is Jim Petzer, your host on Authentic News, right here on RBN Live, the 16th day of May, 2024, 2025. We have more than 200 Republicans working to sabotage the chances of an Iran nuclear deal. Very, very bad. Antiwar.com reports. More than 200 Republicans in Congress have sent a letter to President Trump urging him that any deal with Iran must involve the complete dismantlement of Tehran's nuclear enrichment program, which Iranian officials have made clear is a non-starter. The letter was signed by 177 GOP House members and every Republican in the Senate except for Rand Paul. The Iranian regime should know the administration has congressional backing to ensure their ability to enrich uranium is permanently eliminated. This is, by the way, colossally stupid. Iran is not seeking to develop nuclear weapons. They agreed to the earlier deal. Now Trump wants to come back after Netanyahu persuaded him to drop it. Here's more of the warmongering by the GOP. Breaking story, namely, that this is going to happen if they can have it. Here we go.
To a degree that nobody should be, but there was also a woman, if you recall, who was left bloodied and hospitalized. She has not come forward before for an interview on camera. She'll do that with us later today, and she's going to be in conversation with Abu Bakr as well. RFK Jr. testified before the House. We'll go through some of that. Kristi Noem did as well. And Elon and Grok are fighting over white genocide, which has interesting, it's not only hilarious, but it has interesting implications for AI transparency, the nature of truth, the nature of AI personhood. It's
the nature of humanity.
The nature of humanity, whether or not it can survive. It's really unbelievable. If you've missed this because you're blessedly off of Elon's site, it actually is quite a phenomenon that we witnessed over the last 24 hours, and we'll explain that. Grok, is that true? How do we know if it's true if Grok is not telling us if it's true?
Grok?
We're just going to have to paw our way in the dark here without Grok.
Well, bear in mind, an AI system is only good as a data. A nephew of mine actually sought to see what one of these chat would give about my trial here in Wisconsin, which is coming to an end. And it reported that I hadn't even shown up, hadn't submitted documents, that I had no case at all, which was, of course, ridiculous, completely contradictory. So remember, even these AI systems function on the basis of the computer science principle GIGO, garbage in, garbage out. Meanwhile, Trump is working with the Syrian al-Qaeda leader turned president, praising him for his strong past. You got to understand, this guy was a nasty. He was ISIS and al-Qaeda. The idea Trump is making friends with him is bizarre. Wednesday, President Trump met with Ahmed al-Shara, the founder of al-Qaeda in Syria, who became the country's de facto leader after his rebranded group of jihadists, known as Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, or HTS, took power in Damascus in December of 2024. Trump said he had a very good meeting with Shara, who was previously known as Abdul Ahmed al-Jali. Young, attractive guy, tough guy, strong pass, very strong pass fighter. He's got a real shot at holding it together. The president met with him in Saudi Arabia with Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman before heading to Qatar. The meeting came a day after he announced he would lift sanctions on Syria. Now, what needs to be understood is this whole Syria thing had a very long history. It was really a conflict over pipelines. Many have questioned why Russia became involved in the Syria war, but overlooked the fight over natural gas. As Harvard professor Mitchell Horenstein and George Romer wrote last month in Foreign Affairs, and this is in an article back in April of 2017, which shows how long this fight has been brewing. Russia currently supplies Europe with a quarter of the gas it uses for heating, cooking, fuel, and other activities. 80% of the gas Gazprom produces is sold to Europe. So maintaining that market is very important. But Europe doesn't like being so reliant. The fact is, we're talking about two pipelines, one of which goes from Iran through Syria to Europe, the other from Qatar through Saudi Arabia, through Syria to Europe. This is always what it's always been about. The plans had Russia's blessing, but apparently because it could mean more influence over Iran, which, unlike Qatar, did not host a U.S. airbase, signed off on the Iran plan for the Iranian gas pipeline in 2012, due to be completed in 2016, ultimately delayed because of the Arab Spring, because of all the intervention. So what we've really been dealing with in Syria is a conflict over pipelines. Meanwhile, Mike Adams, he thinks that Trump is actually making peace. It's a nice thought. I hope it pans out. Let's hear what he has to say.
Welcome to Brighteon Broadcast News with Mike Adams, the Health Ranger.
All right, folks, welcome to Brighteon Broadcast News for Thursday, May 15th, 2025. I'm Mike Adams, of course, and I thank you for taking the time to join me. As always, we have just extraordinary information to share with you. I've got a couple of special reports that I recorded earlier. One of them is called The Economics of Depopulation, why the extermination of people allows governments to print more currency. A lot of people have not really thought about this, how depopulation is deflationary, and thus it allows governments to get away with being able to counterbalance more of their inflationary tactics. So I have a full discussion of that coming up because, as you know, it's very clear to me that a depopulation agenda is underway. Fortunately, I think it's pretty easy to survive this effort and to not be depopulated, right? So that report's coming up. Then also I've got another report about how AI technology is being perverted by governments to try to enslave humanity rather than empowering humanity. And this is, of course, why my own project, Enoch, which is at Brighteon.ai, is focused on empowering humanity with knowledge that has typically been censored by other tech platforms. So as we release our AI engine, and I apologize that it's now 2.5 months late, but it will get released. And as we release that, you'll see how empowering it is to have access to information without censorship and without some government agenda or big tech agenda or CDC agenda or pandemic agenda or pro-war agenda or whatever else. I mean, it's so refreshing to be able to interact with knowledge systems that are not designed to enslave you, but rather to...
Well, it's a nice idea, too, about AI, mind you. I have quite an extensive background in the field, having founded the international journal Minds and Machines, which I solely edited for 10 years, having published numerous books, AI and Scope and Limits, and the introductory book, Philosophy and Cognitive Science, second edition, I highly recommend. Meanwhile, Trump touts Camel's largest Boeing order in history during his visit to Qatar. This is from Middle East Eye. So, what are we learning? President Trump continued his blitz of Gulf deals in Qatar Wednesday, telling the American jet maker Boeing to get those planes out there after unveiling what he said was the American economy's biggest deal in history. Trump and Qatar had agreed to order up to 210 American-made Boeing 787 Dreamliner and 777X aircraft in a $96 billion deal. Congratulations to Boeing. Get those planes out there, Trump said at a ceremony alongside Qatar's ruler, Sheikh Tamad bin Hamad Al Thani. I just want to thank you, he added. Well, maybe. Meanwhile, Istanbul 2.0. Know when to hold 'em, know when to fold 'em, responsible statecraft. The biggest achievement of today's Istanbul talks was that they are even taking place. U.S. engagement will remain vital to getting a peace deal over the line. Russia's desire for reset with Washington keeps them on track. I have a sense of deja vu as I contemplate these long overdue peace talks between Ukraine and Russia in Istanbul in April 2022. Ukraine and Russia were close to agreeing to a peace treaty less than 2 months after the war began. However, it came crashing down amid claims that Western governments, in particular the U.S. and the U.K., encouraged Ukraine to keep fighting. That was a British PM at the time rushed there to persuade Zelensky not to settle with Russia. Well, it was originally planned that Putin and Trump would go to engage with Zelensky, but my last report, they're not going. I've heard resurrected the hint it might still happen, but I'm not at all confident. Meanwhile, we have Hal Turner. U.S. insanity becomes evident with ongoing Ukraine moves, quoting Einstein, that insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. That's clearly sort of an aphorism. It's not quite right in terms of capturing the concept. Meanwhile, someone once said, quoting the Einstein, such seemed to be the case with the U.S. latest position on the Russia-Ukraine conflict. In a statement that quickly caused a wave of comments on both sides of the Atlantic, the special envoy of the admin of President Trump, Keith Kellogg, confirmed Washington is actively discussing with its ally the deployment of military units from Great Britain, France, Germany, and Poland in the territory west of the Dnieper River. Ain't gonna happen. The move, as stated, part of a wider plan to stabilize the situation in Ukraine and establish an initial ceasefire. There's just one minor problem. Russia has already refused this about 15 times. Just insane. Meanwhile, so there you are, 3 years into the Russia-Ukraine and conflict. What does Special Envoy Kellogg propose? The deployment of military units from Great Britain, France, Germany, and Poland, NATO, west of the Dnieper. The facts. 9 Feb 1990, in a deal approved by Mikhail Gorbachev, the last leader of the Soviet Union, as a quid pro quo for accepting German reunification in NATO. Secretary of State James Baker pledged that NATO would not expand 1 inch to the east. Columbia professor Jeffrey Sachs and Chicago professor John Mearsheimer argue that during the lengthy negotiation on German unification, U.S., European, and German leaders made explicit assurance to Gorbachev there'd be no future NATO expansion eastward. U.S. National Security Archive document proved this promise was made to Gorbachev by then Secretary of State James Baker III during a meeting in the Kremlin on February 9, 1990. And you know how well we've adhered to that. 14 new nations have joined NATO ever since? Absolutely unbelievable. The word of the U.S. means nothing. Meanwhile, Netanyahu's plan to starve Gaza in full effect. We have here on Redacted. Let's get some thoughts.
Your colleague, Veronica Escobar of Texas, called the conditions there unacceptable. She was there on Friday. Is she right? What more must be done?
Actually, the facts are these: there are more children, about 700 more children, unaccompanied children, coming over the border. This is a humanitarian challenge.
Popular semi-automatic weapons in the United States.
AOC working on it.
Up and called it a genocide, and that this will not stand. Even Piers Morgan, who's been fully in the tank on this, is now saying that Israel has crossed the line. Trump is distancing himself from all of this. So we're going to dive into that here on the show today.
Well, if we're fair, two countries have consistently called out on behalf the plight of the Palestinian people. It's Spain and France, surprisingly enough. So credit where credit's due.
Yeah.
Right? We don't always hate we're
going to talk about the Ukraine failed peace talks. Where was Putin in all of this? Zelensky's feeling butthurt about showing up and finding out that Putin wasn't there. And also photographers were given explicit instructions on how to photograph Zelensky. Yes, height requirements on how you actually film him while he was there. We're going to talk about that.
Plus Trump's Middle East trip. It was momentous. What came out of it, what his new foreign policy is, how it's going to really affect Americans. This could have lasting effects on the American.
Yeah, see, Zelensky's a little guy, so he has to be photographed in a certain way to look like he's average even when he's really little. Meanwhile, we have responsible statecraft, the desperation of Gaza famine, denialism. Defenders of Israel's government are on a mission. Unfortunate facts are getting in the way. At the risk of famine, as the risk of famine spreads across Gaza, and as shocking images of overcrowded soup lines stream from Gaza daily, an influential network of Israeli government defenders has emerged to tell you that none of this is happening at all. A free press, a pro-Israeli media outlet often sympathetic to neoconservative worldviews, published a highly circulated article last week from journalist Michael Ames called The Gaza Famine Myth, which reports that demonstrate that food security in Gaza has been far above the famine and crisis level international humanitarian organizations have observed since at least early 2024. The Israeli blockade, which the government openly admits restricted all aid from entering the Strip since March 2nd, 2025, has once again pushed Gaza to the edge of famine, with UN reports warning starvation levels far surpassing those of 2024. How absurd. Meanwhile, of course, we have Israeli strike killing more than 100 Palestinians in Gaza from antiwar.com. This is absolutely routine. At least 143 Palestinians were killed by Israeli attacks in Gaza Thursday. That would be yesterday. Al Jazeera reported as the Israeli military has intensified its strikes on the besieged territory amid President Trump's visit to the region, which may or may not come to pass. Meanwhile, Israeli forces bombed 2 Gaza hospitals in one day by targeting European Hospital and Nasser Hospital in Khan Yunis. The Israeli military is further decimating Gaza's already devastated medical system. That's because they want everyone dead. Meanwhile, secret Western intel backed Mossad hits on Palestinians. Bad, bad, bad. This is from the New Era. What do we have? A secret network of Western intel agencies assisted Israel in a campaign of assassination against Palestinians, which took place in the early 1970s. And we've been involved in this for a very long time. Encrypted cables from Swiss archives, studied by Dr. Aviva Gutmann, an historian of strategy and intelligence at Aberystwyth University, shows that 18 Western states shared intel with Israel as it was targeting Palestinians across Europe for assassination. Nice. Meanwhile, wildfires rage in Europe. The Truth Seeker reporting One cannot help wondering if this is karma at work. While the Israeli Defense Forces conducts genocide campaigns in Gaza, wildfires have run rampant through large parts of Israel. The fires, thought to be the worst in Israel's history, have prompted Prime Minister Netanyahu to declare a state of emergency. The Zionist state has appealed for international aid to help contain the fires, and the irony is unmistakable. So while IDF restricts the supply of desperately needed food and medical aid into Gaza, Israel is calling for international assistance to help combat wildfires. Several towns in Israel have been evacuated, as have whole neighborhoods in Haifa, Israel's third largest city. While officials in the National Firefighting Service complain, they have insufficient men and equipment to contain the fires. Meanwhile, Israel's plan exposed. Trump and McGregor.
Let's watch this video.
Let's see what we have here. Colonel McGregor always on.
No one in the international community, and that may also be true for many people in Israel, who've had to deal with Mr. Netanyahu, have liked the man. Most of them regard him as an arrogant sociopath. And given what's happened in Gaza, he may well deserve the title of psychopath. So at this point, I don't think it costs President Trump very much at home with his enormous followers in the Jewish community and donors to make it clear that he's unhappy with the behavior of Mr. Netanyahu. Now, beyond that, I don't think we should reach any conclusions. So I think he's just simply said to the Saudis, and I think he'll say the same thing in the Emirates, let's let bygones be bygones. Whether or not that works, I don't know.
Colonel Douglas Macgregor just dropped some serious truth bombs, and we need to talk about it. So first off, Trump might be finally backing away from Netanyahu and his whole Greater Israel dream. That's big. Macgregor's saying Trump's cozying up to the Saudis instead. Honestly, makes sense. Israel's war in Gaza is turning global opinion. Even Trump sees the political fallout.
It appears that Trump is getting so sick and tired of Netanyahu, whether it's personality or whether it's the destruction in Gaza and the advancement of the Greater Israel Project, that the prime minister had to take to the airwaves to deny it. Here he is earlier today in Israel. Chris, cut number 8.
This is a very emotional moment. Eden Alexander has returned home. We embrace him and we embrace his family. This was achieved thanks to our military pressure and the diplomatic pressure applied by President Trump. This is a winning combination. I spoke with President Trump today. He told me, I am committed to Israel. I am committed to continuing to work with you in close cooperation in order to achieve all of our war objectives, releasing all of the hostages and defeating Hamas. This goes together. They are combined with each other.
Hard for me to believe that Trump said that and used those words, but Netanyahu obviously felt the need to articulate it. How does that strike you?
I've been disturbed ever since I learned that Mr. Alexander was an Israeli from New Jersey. I thought everybody from New Jersey was an American. I thought it was very strange.
Yeah.
And clearly it was a slight. And Mr. Netanyahu, despite his arrogance, is very, very sensitive, much like Mr. Trump.
Yeah.
Then Macgregor calls out U.S. politicians showing loyalty to foreign militaries, like wearing an IDF uniform in Congress. That's not just cringe, it's dangerous. Imagine a senator repping China's army. You call it treason. Why is this okay for Israel?
The young man was born not far from where I live in New Jersey. But somehow, I guess, can you join the IDF without becoming an Israeli citizen? I don't know what the Israeli law is, but he was in the IDF when he was captured.
Well, for many years, we had laws in the books that said that if you served in the armed forces of another state, you lost your citizenship. If you voted in an election in a foreign state, you lost your citizenship. Then there was a Supreme Court ruling in 1965, with which you may be more familiar than I am, that overturned that. I'm someone who's never been comfortable with the idea of multiple citizenships. Either you are an American or you are not. And that was the view of the founders. And I tend to subscribe to that view.
Well, my very first political speech in 2008, I declared that no dual citizen should ever occupy a policy shaping or decision making position in the American government because you could not know that their loyalty to the other state did not outweigh their loyalty to the United States. Meanwhile, there's rare earth and reindustrialization in the UN's review. New York Times is not usually mentioned in the same breath with Mining Journal or the Northern Miner, the leading lights for the mining industry between April 14th and 17th. New York Times ran 5 stories with the titles below. China halts critical minerals as trade war intensifies April 14th. What are rare earth metals? The export halted by China April 15th. How China took over the world's rare earth industry, April 16. The mine is America's, the minerals are China's, April 16. Here is what to know about rare earth minerals and renewable energy, April 17. In April, the Times also published these titles. Elon Musk warns rare earth magnet shortage may delay Tesla's robots. U.S. announces deal to share Ukraine's mineral wealth. Not just rare earth, U.S. gets many critical minerals from China. China's halt to critical minerals poses risk for U.S. military programs. Readers may be forgiven for thinking the New York Times is entering an arena normally reserved to mining.com. Meanwhile, Hal Turner. Chinese solar inverters found containing Trojan horse communicators. Get this. The has found Trojan horse communication devices in Chinese-made solar power inverters. They are used to change DC power from solar panel battery racks into AC power for use to power homes. In some solar setups, the inverter is also connected to the power grid and to sell back energy to local electric companies. The Trojan horses can be turned on and turned off, controlled remotely, can be used to destabilize public energy grids, potentially leading to massive blackouts like the recent one in Spain. Those Chinese, very clever. Meanwhile, Trump just secured a $600 billion deal that, according to the title, has China shaking with fear. I'd be very surprised. Trump has once again proven why he's known as the deal maker in chief after announcing a jaw-dropping $600 billion investment commitment from Saudi Arabia into the American economy. The White House announced a massive deal during Trump's visit to Saudi on May 13th, where the president secured what's being called the largest set of commercial agreements on record between the two nations. The deals celebrated today are historic and transformative for both countries and represent a new golden era partnership between the United States and Saudi Arabia. The White House stated in a fact sheet detailing the agreements. Well, we'll see. Colonel McGregor suggests Trump may be turning the attention of the United States to Saudi Arabia as opposed to Israel. Meanwhile, we have some stunning domestic developments, which
You are tuned in to the Republic Broadcasting Network. Visit our website by going to republicbroadcasting.org.
Did you know?
I remember all my life, though some have changed, some forever, not for better. Some have gone, and some remain. All these places have living in my life. I've loved them all.
In an almost unbelievable development, former FBI Director James Comey is calling for the assassination of President Trump as Dems cheer on. Former FBI Director James Comey has come under intense and immense scrutiny after he posted a message many are interpreting as a threat on President Trump's life. In a since-deleted Instagram post, but captured, including here, Comey posted an image made up of seashells and stones, seemingly at a beach that spell out the numbers 86 space 47. 86, of course, is a common slang for assassination. 47, of course, the number of President Trump's administration. Here we have Benny Johnson. Former FBI Director James Comey is calling for the assassination of President Trump. 86 means to kill, to murder, to execute judicially. And there you see it. Comey remarkably put out this Instagram saying he thought this was cool and claims ridiculously he had no idea it had anything to do with violence. Meanwhile, Director of National Intelligence Tulsi Gabbard calls for Comey to be put behind bars over the Trump post. Director of National Intelligence Thursday called for former FBI Director James Comey to be put behind bars. James Comey posted a cryptic message in his Instagram account Thursday, spelling out seashells 86 space 47. Cool shell formation on my beach walk, Comey said in his caption. How absurd. Comey deleted the post after major backlash, and he updated with an unbelievable comment. I posted earlier a picture of some shells I saw today on a beach walk, which I assumed were a political message. I didn't realize some folks associate those numbers with violence. It never occurred to me, but I oppose violence of any kind, so I took the post down. So Comey expect the public to believe that he, a former FBI director, did not know the meaning of 86? James Comey is also implying he didn't assemble the shell formation. He's claiming it just happened. He happened to stumble across the assassination message while he was on a beach walk. Wow, what an absurd situation. Meanwhile, Trump appeals to the Supreme Court to lift its ban on deporting dangerous criminal aliens. It's a funny old world, ain't it? Sometimes it feels the most basic common sense ideas are treated like radical propositions. Take, for example, the notion that a country ought to, protect its own citizens, ensure its borders. It means something, not roll out the red carpet for those who wish us harm. Crazy, right? Thankfully, not everyone's forgotten these foundational principles. You've got leaders who still believe their primary job is to safeguard the nation and its people, and they're not afraid to make the tough calls, even if it ruffles a few feathers along the everybody's welcome, no questions asked crowd. It's refreshing, like a cold glass of iced tea on a sweltering day, to see decisive action when it's so clearly needed. And speaking of decisive action, Trump admin is showing it means business when it comes to national security. From the millennial to post-millennial, it's an alarming prospect given that TDA has conducted kidnappings, extorted businesses, bribed public officials, authorized members to attack and kill law enforcement, assassinate a Venezuelan opposition figure, prompting the Secretary of State to deem TDI a threat to national security. That's, of course, Tren de Agua, the gang, which the Supreme Court has seemed to rule cannot be deported, or rather, it's a judge, which they are now appealing to the Supreme Court, and hopefully the court will find the administration's action reasonable, appropriate, and within their authority, which is undoubtedly the case. Meanwhile, Democrats rage after Trump welcomes white refugees from South Africa. You know, it's funny how the self-proclaimed champions of tolerance can be so particular about who deserves a sliver of their apparently very finite sympathy. One day they're weeping over one group, demanding open borders and endless resources the next. Well, let's just say their compassion seems to have a very specific and often contradictory checklist. It's almost as though the who matters more than the what. If you've ever tried to explain simple and varnished truths to someone whose mind is already made up, you understand the special kind of bafflement we're encountering today. So, what's the liberal outrage machine sputtering and fuming about? Grab your popcorn. The Trump admin, in a move that frankly screams common sense, has decided to grab refugee status to some white South Africans. Yes, you read that, white refugees. And cue the collective meltdown of the usual suspects. The New York Times, bless their predictable hearts, reported dozens of white South Africans arrived after being granted refugee status, while helpfully reminding everyone that President Trump has made it virtually impossible for any other refugees to seek safe haven. The implication, of course, is clear. How dare these particular refugees get in? Well, the history here is really stunning because these are white farmers who made South Africa viable, profitable, wealthy. But since there have been changes in government, they've been subject to slaughter by the black government there. It's outrageous. Of all groups in the world, these and the Palestinians are probably those most deserving of refugee status. So, of course, the Palestinians don't want to give up their land because it was their land historically for thousands of years until these interlopers showed up in 1948 and started taking over, occupying land that did not belong to them. And an extensive judicial legal review has shown they are not entitled to the lands of Palestine. Meanwhile, zero hedge. Racism is only white. Anti-white art installation goes viral, sparks outrage. A number of anti-white slogans were used at an art installation at the University of Grenoble in France for Equality Month, with widespread outrage leading the president of the university to demand they be taken down. The inscription repeatedly attacked white males, claiming that only white persons are guilty of racism, with the entire scandal going viral, garnering tens of thousands of comments and millions of views on French social media. Meanwhile, flashback, South African EFF leader Julius Malema admits Trump is right. We're coming after white farmers. This is dated May 14th, just 2 days ago. On Wednesday, President Trump tweeted out his concern over the racist South African land and farmer seizures and killing of farmers. Trump, I have asked Secretary of State, this was then Pompeo, to closely study the South African land and farm seizures and expropriations and the large-scale killing of farmers. South African government is now seizing land from white farmers. It's gone on unabated for years. There ought to be an international outcry, but largely muted, very much as we have in the case of Palestine. Meanwhile, flashback. Dems critical of Trump's Qatari jet gift rode camel in expenses paid 2021 trip to the Gulf Emirates. As Democrats attack President Trump for accepting a Qatari royal family gift of a $400 million jet to be refurbished to serve as Air Force One, I think that question is very much up in the air for national security reasons. Photos have resurfaced of Democrat lawmakers 3 years earlier enjoying an all-expense-paid trip to the Gulf Emirate. The trip, paid for by the U.S. Qatar Business Council, involved 4 House Democrats and 1 Republican who went to Qatar in 2021. During the trip, at least 2 of the Democrats participated in sightseeing excursion via Camelback for them and their family members. Well, what else is new? But I do think this jet thing is very, very troubling. The idea that you might have to take it apart to inspect it and then put it back together at fabulous expense, for example. How otherwise? Maybe there's a way of scanning it. Maybe you can't do the equivalent of an X-ray, yet to be determined. So long, climate tyrants. Trump smacks down insane Biden-era climate regulations. Under the guise of protecting the environment, President Joe Biden and his Democrat pals sought to control every aspect of our being, from the types of shower heads we're able to buy to the kinds of stoves we can cook our food on. And thankfully, the current admin has taken those chains off the American people. President Trump has hit these draconian regulations head on in an effort to free the American people from the Biden-era climate tyranny. According to the Washington Free Beacon, the Department of Energy took massive action earlier this week to slash dozens of regulations for household appliances, from dishwashers to dryers, that were issued under the previous president's orders. The regulations included restricted sales on certain types of gas stoves, faucets, shower heads, microwaves, even ceiling fans, while forcing the American people to settle for more expensive and less effective options for the environment. Here we have Trump ends Biden-era ban on gas stoves. This was just such an obvious, colossal stupidity. All right, grab a cup of coffee brewed just the way you like, not how some bureaucrats think you should, and settle in. Feels for the longest time, every time you turned around, another helpful suggestion was coming out of Washington, D.C., telling you how to live, what to buy, even how to cook your dinner. Enough to make you wonder if some people back there think we're all just toddlers who can't be trusted to pick out our own appliances without their guidance and often quite expensive hand. This business about banning gas stoves was just ridiculous from the beginning. Leading the charge to correct is the Department of Energy under new sensible management, liberating a whole range of household appliances from the clutches of overzealous regulation. Remember the great gas stove panic of 2023, when they tried to tell you what kind of stove you could or couldn't buy? Gone. Strict water standard for dishwashers and shower heads. Now left your dishes spotty and your showers unsatisfying? Reversed. The government's grand plan to force everyone into an all-electric everything, whether you want it or not, shelved. All positive developments. Meanwhile, Michael Yon reports on the ground from Texas. It's not what you think, folks. This is from the Truth Seeker. In a Substack post featuring his interview with Emerald Robinson, independent journalist Michael Yon paints a disturbing picture of the Texas law enforcement community. We think of Texas as a bright red state, but maybe we need to recalculate. Read below. Early yesterday, I flew over Colony Ridge with Dave Cannon in his helicopter. Fog had become thick because Ridge Colony is built on precious low wetland. So he came back with Dave's airplane, got higher after fog burned off. More on the flight today. Bottom line, a critical mass of Texas law enforcement is refusing to help with mass deportations. Texas, DPS, Department of Public Safety specifically, outright refusing to help deport, as are many local law enforcement agencies. That's pretty damn disturbing, because you think of Texas as strong for law enforcement. Meanwhile, sad trombone. New poll finds Democrats deeply pessimistic about the future of their party, deservedly so. Democrats are deeply despondent about the future of their party, according to new polling from the AP and Newark Center for Public Affairs Research. Not surprising they'd feel this way. They got clobbered in the November election by the man they tried to destroy through every means at their disposal. They lost the House, the Senate, and the White House. The funny thing about the poll is that some Democrats are bummed out, because they think the party isn't doing enough to fight Trump. They don't seem to understand one of the main reasons why they are in the doldrums they are. Here we go. 6 months after Trump's presidential victory, Democrats remain deeply pessimistic about the future of their party, though neither the party, Democrat or Republican, is viewed favorably by a majority in the U.S. The new poll conducted earlier by the AP Newark found that only about 1/3 of Democrats are very optimistic or even somewhat about their party's future. That's down sharply from July 2024, when about 6 in 10 Democrats had a positive outlook. Well, hardly surprising. Where are the Democrats going to go? Meanwhile, AOC warns that there'll be hell to pay if law-breaking Dems face accountability. This article calls her a communist. I'm not sure I would buy that. Representative AOC has stirred up controversy after threatening local law enforcement with hell to pay should they dare arrest members of the Democrat Party who recently broke the law and physically attacked law enforcement. Leave it to Democrats to threaten violence if they're held accountable for their violence. Over the weekend, ICE released a video showing Representative Lamont Beaver verbally abusing and physically assaulting federal agents at the Delaney Hall Detention Center in Newark, New Jersey. More to come.
Attracts me like no other lover. Something in the way she woos me. I don't want to leave her now. You know I believe in how. Somewhere in a smile.
Four final stories briefly. Bruce Springsteen issues an extreme political statement during a European tour. Here's what he said. The mighty E Street Band is here tonight to call upon the righteous power of art, of music, of rock and roll in dangerous times. He said, in my home, the America I love, the America I've written about, that has been a beacon of hope and liberty for 250 years, it's currently in the hands of a corrupt, incompetent, and treasonous administration. He added, tonight, I ask all who believe in democracy and the best of our American experiment to rise with us. Raise your voices against authoritarianism and let freedom ring. I think that's a bit much. Meanwhile, here we have ESPN. Stephen Smith delivers a reality check to anti-Trump Democrats. When someone insists on staying directly in the path of an oncoming train, reasonable people eventually stop trying to rescue them. Isn't that exactly the peculiar position of many Americans when they watch congressional Democrats continue their unwavering commitment to obstruct President Trump at every turn, regardless of policy or potential benefit? Yes, indeed. It's happening from the highest ranking to the lowest ranking member of the Democrat Party. Meanwhile, Harvard thought it had a cheap copy of the Magna Carta. Turned out to be extremely rare. Harvard for decades assumed it had a cheap copy in its collection. a stained and faded document at purchase for less than $30. But two researchers have concluded it's something much more valuable, a rare version from 1300 issued by Britain's King Edward I. The original Magna Carta established in 1215 the principle the king is subject to law and has formed the basis of constitutions globally. There are 4 copies of the original, and until now, there are believed to be only 6 copies of the 1300 version. I say, excellent. Meanwhile, get this. HHS to end COVID-19 vaccine recommendation for kids and pregnant women. According to the Wall Street Journal, the Trump admin, under the leadership of Robert F. Kennedy Jr., is preparing to end routine CDC recommendations that pregnant women, teenagers, and children receive COVID vaccines. The decision, expected to be announced in the coming days, represents a long overdue departure from current ill-advised CDC guidance, which still urges vaccination for everyone aged 6 months or older, including during pregnancy. This is a critical first step, but it's far from over.